Hi everybody, it's Gregg Bendian. Welcome to the ProgCast. Today I'll be speaking with composer, keyboardist, music conceptualist Don Preston. As many of you know, Don was an original member with Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. Back in '66, he recorded Absolutely Free and 12 subsequent albums with Frank before going off to do his own work as a composer and keyboardist with Carla Bley, Michael Mantler. He's on the Apocalypse Now soundtrack. He's a synth pioneer. I've had the great pleasure of playing drums in his trio, both in LA and in New York. And we get into some really interesting stuff about his roots as a bass player in Detroit, on the jazz scene. So sit back and enjoy my interview with Don Preston. Please like and subscribe so that we can keep doing this. Got a lot of good stuff coming up. Next week is going to be Randy Brecker. So here's my 90 minutes with Don Preston. And thank you, Don. You're the best. Great to have you. Welcome, everyone, to the ProgCast. Gregg Bendian here. And I am joined by a very special guest today from his home in Southern California, the wonderful producer, composer, synthesist, keyboardist, musical innovator, Don Preston. Don, how are you?
Wow, that's quite a title you gave me.
I think it's an apt title for you. Don, you know, there's something I've been wanting to ask you, if you'll abide with this for a minute, but I'm fascinated by your early life and the fact that your father was such a heavy musical figure on the Detroit scene.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I was on the road with my father from the time I was born until I was around 4.5 or 5 years old. So I think we traveled most of the time. I don't even recall us having a house. Of course, I don't recall much back then. But finally, I got school age, and my dad decided to buy a house in Detroit, and he worked for NBC in Detroit, WWJ, and then I went to school, you know, so I was doing that. And the only thing is, I mean, as far as really early influence, that my dad worked at home and he wrote, you know, he was constantly in his studio writing music and you know, writing it down. He was writing for a big band. Back in that time when they didn't have TV, they had these breakfast club shows, which were quite extensive. They had probably a 15-piece band there, plus singers and what have you. So my dad was the staff arranger, and he wrote music for all of that stuff, you know.
Radio?
Mostly, yeah, radio. TV didn't start until I was grown up, pretty much, halfway grown up.
And wasn't he composer in residence for the Detroit Symphony?
Yeah, he was. And he kind of knew people in the orchestra. And so he wrote pieces for them, and they played his work, you know, so that was kind of great.
What kind of stuff?
Oh, pretty light classical, you know, pretty modern stuff, but he was a good composer, you know, although Stravinsky kind of put down his type of, you know, what he was. He was talking about, yeah, all these orchestras, they have a resident composer, and, you know, they write some stuff. And so he was like, not very, he didn't think much of them. Of course, I mean, look who he was, you know, probably the best composer there was on the planet at that time. So I don't feel bad about that. It's just his take. And, you know, usually people don't know what the inside story is of all that, you know, and how good are they? You know, I mean, maybe some are good and some aren't good. So, you know, I think my dad was interesting. You know, he would write. I remember one piece that he wrote for the orchestra called "The Mosquito and the Marmoset." So it was kind of like an orchestra depiction of, you know, those two creatures, and the mosquitoes biting the marmoset's getting all flustered and everything. So I mean, you know, that kind of music. But it was good, you know, it was interesting.
Had he studied?
My dad, much like myself, was self-taught. You know, playing in bands for, you know, the early part of his life I'm sure he wrote arrangements for the bands too. So writing music was really second nature for him. I mean, he just did it, you know. I mean, he composed a lot of music too, you know, during that. He used to put ads in the Musicians Union paper, and the one that it was, I'm not sure it was where it was from, but it was all over. It was like all the musicians unions would publish that paper, and then he would have ads in there for music that he composed for small groups and stuff like that, you know. It was good. And he recorded some stuff like, you know, stuff that would show you what it sounded like and everything. So he was an interesting person. One thing that we did do together, well, one time I had a bass with me somewhere. I don't know where I got that, but so I went down. At that time, his studio was in their basement, and jammed with him for, you know, an hour and 2 hours. That was really interesting for me, you know, showing him that I could play, you know, and seeing how he adjusted to my playing and everything.
Was he playing piano or saxophone?
Piano.
Piano.
So I played bass. I don't know if you knew that.
I did in your early life, and you had a life as a jazz sideman, right?
I guess you could say that, yeah.
Who were some of the people that you played bass for?
Well, I played bass with Elvin Jones and for 2 years, Tommy Flanagan and Yusuf Lateef. And then when I left Detroit, I remember playing with Shorty Rogers. I think I played at the Lighthouse, playing both things. You know, one time I would play bass, and another time I would play piano. At one point, you know, after I got done with Alvin, I was like pretty hot. You know, I mean, I could play with anybody at that time. Yeah. So, but you know, piano was my favorite instrument, and I pretty much, the bass kind of dwindled away after a certain point. I have a bass right now. Somebody gave me. They got it out of the trash, and the bridge was way over on one side, and I mean the neck was bent way over on one side. So I had a friend of mine, Putter Smith. You know Putter?
I know the name, yeah.
Yeah. He had me do it, but he told me what to do. I drilled a screw about 6 inches long into the back of the neck, and that straightened the whole neck out. And it was pretty amazing. Now it's fine. It works fine. I'm happy with it. I mean, it's still just a plywood base, you know, but
yeah.
but it does the job, and I get to play it every once in a while. I practice on it. And I'm thinking about buying a cello, though. I really would like to get a cello. Oscar Pettiford, he had a cello, but he tuned it in bass tuning.
Oh.
So he could, he didn't have to figure out how to play it. It just, like a bass. So I'm thinking about doing that, something like that, because it's such a great electronic music instrument. You can do so many things with that because it's beautiful. And yeah.
I think Ron Carter also doubled on cello.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, I think on those Eric Dolphy records, like on Out There, it's Duvivier on bass, but it's Ron Carter on cello.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
Do you have recordings of your dad's work?
I have, I have a few things of him playing piano. I have one tape of him playing, just improvising to a thunderstorm. And that's kind of interesting.
That says a lot.
Yeah, right. That's where I came from.
Wait a minute. That explains a lot, Don Preston.
Yeah, right.
I remember playing your music with you and Ken Filiano to sounds of radio transmissions from other universes.
Yeah, what's going on with Ken? Have you heard from him at all?
I have not. What was this piece we did? It was called The Eons. What was it?
Oh God, I mean, I have dozens of those things.
Okay. Well, I had the pleasure of doing one of them with you. That was fantastic.
Yeah, me too. I've always thought you were a great drummer, and you didn't disappoint.
Well, I was rising to the occasion of playing with the great Don Preston. So much history there, Don.
Yeah.
Gee, as a bass player, like, what was it like playing with Elvin?
I words cannot convey. No, he was like about 20 years old, but he was playing then the way he played, before he died.
Really?
Every part of his body was a different rhythm. His hands, his feet, his voice, everything was like, and he'd be singing rhythms, not just singing or humming a melody or anything. He'd be going, he'd be making all these rhythmic sounds, and of course his playing was like mind-boggling. And one time, I have to tell you, some young guy sat down at the piano, and we played something really fast. And Elvin got this startled look on his face, and he started saying, E minor 7. He started calling out the changes of the song, like a bar ahead of it, I mean, how could a drummer, I mean, not to denigrate drummers or anything, but how could anyone do that while playing all this other stuff? Oh my God.
Wow.
He was so amazing. But at this place that we were playing at, oh God, Milt Jackson would come in and sit in on piano and play piano with 2 fingers. And all kinds of Red somebody. I can't think of it now, but
Garland?
No, it wasn't him. That would be interesting. But yeah, a lot of great people would come in there and play.
So you had a lot of different types of jazz experiences at that time. Was it mainly straight ahead bop kind of stuff?
Was it what?
Was it more of a bop kind of thing at that point, or
Oh,
what type of jazz?
It was, depends on what you call it. I mean, I never could get those terms clear, and knowing what's different about bop than jazz. I mean, maybe Dizzy Gillespie, that's Bob, I guess. But that's the same time that Miles was doing his first stuff with Sonny Rollins, and I mean, that was, to me, I couldn't tell the difference. It was just jazz. It was all jazz to me.
Yeah, and certainly the Detroit scene had just so much jazz going on around that time.
It was, oh man, you could go any place, anywhere, anytime, and sit in with a group of really good musicians. White or black, it didn't matter. I mean, although I would say Pepper was a little prejudiced because he always stuck with the black guys. And so I got to play with him a few times.
Pepper Adams?
Yeah. I worked in a record store with him back in the 1954 or something like that. Yeah, he was young, but he could play his ass off. I mean, another guy that I never heard him. I never heard a difference between the early Pepper Adams and the one that recorded a lot of stuff.
It's also interesting that you're talking about the 50s, and apparently you're saying the Detroit scene was a mixed scene.
Oh, but no. I mean, it kind of, Pepper maybe, but mostly it was the blacks stayed in their place and the white guys stayed with, the black guys mostly played in clubs and the white guys mostly played in their homes.
But you had a gig with Alvin.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call it a gig. I'm saying that I played with him for 2 years, mm-hmm. But the bass player of the group was Ollie Jackson, Milt Jackson's brother. But I'd go in there and they'd play their first set, and then Ollie would see me there and he'd say, "Take over, Don," and I was happy to do it. So that's how that happened.
Okay. And you also studied composition pretty seriously, is that right?
Yeah, I studied orchestration from Walter Piston and Rimsky-Korsakov, which not many people know this. But I discovered recently that Respighi studied with Rimsky-Korsakov. And for years I've been saying, God, his orchestrations are incredible. Yeah. Now I know why.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was Stravinsky's teacher as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you were digging into like Berg and Webern and Stravinsky and all that?
Oh yeah. Mostly listening, but I would get stuff out of the library, whatever I could get, and then I would study even piano technique, although some of it I didn't think was valid. It was a little bit out there, but I was never one to worry about technique too much. I mean, I did practice. I still practice, but I have to. So some of the music, I mean, I still, even my own music is verging on impossible, but so I have to keep up on that.
Yeah, I think it's good to have to practice your own music.
Well,
you're not writing.
If I didn't practice, I couldn't play it.
Yeah.
So, I have to.
But
not everything, that's just some, about 3 or 4 pieces.
Yeah, I just like the idea of being able to challenge yourself compositionally. You're not really thinking about, oh, can I play this? You're thinking about the musical idea.
So I want to show you something right now. I have the Don Preston Songbook, Volume 1, and it's got a lot of songs in here that we probably played together. And there's a shot of me with Meredith Monk. I played it, we did a piece at the Guggenheim Museum, which you can see that's the Guggenheim.
Yeah.
And so that's, I mean, there's a lot of great pictures in here like that. How about this one? Me and Buell Neidlinger.
Oh, cool.
Did you know Buell at all?
I did not, no, but I know his work.
We used to call him Cruel Buell. He had a temperament that was, boy, he didn't put up with anything. But here's Volume 2. And I'm going to send you, I just wrote 5 etudes in March, just while this was starting up. And they're in here as well. They're quite a long bunch of pieces.
That is so cool.
This is a picture of Bunk and I at the Zappanale.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that from where you are, but
Yes.
So yeah, I have a lot of pictures that I put in, you know, these books. There's me playing at a provisional theater with my modular Moog,
Wow.
which I found the guy who bought my modular Moog, and he lives like in the next town. He invited me to come over and play it anytime I want. And thirdly, this is a book I put out about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. It's called, this is all poetry and some pictures, like this cute girl.
Wow, Don, you're prolific.
Hey, you got to do something, you know, nowadays. Can't just sit around. I have I've got a canvas over here just waiting for me to paint it, and I finally decided on a picture that I want to paint.
So Don, if I could interrupt, how are these 2 volumes available? How can they get them from you?
Just write me, Don W. Preston at gmail.com. And I only have about 8 books right now, but they're easily gotten. You know.
Okay, good. That looks very interesting. I'm excited to see what that's all about.
And I just got 50 of these. So I have a bunch of those, you know, if anyone's interested in that kind of stuff.
You know, it's so interesting that you clearly start life as a musician in 1 foot in the jazz world, 1 foot in the classical world.
Well, that's been more recent. You know, I had a piece performed at the Gewandhaus in Leipzig by a string orchestra, and had another piece commissioned by the California Ear Unit, who played that at the Bing Theater and LA County Museum, and stuff like that, you know. And all along the way, people, one time I did this 24-hour piece. Anyhow, I think I played from 3 in the morning to 4 in the morning. So everybody took an hour. I think it was called Vexations.
I guess what I was driving at is that with your comfortability with jazz and being comfortable with the new contemporary classical language, doesn't that set you on a path to be very comfortable with Frank Zappa's world?
Oh, well, sure, of course. I mean, before I got in Zappa's band, I was in another band that we never played in 4/4 or 3/4. It was 5, 7, 9, 11, and all the way up to 19, which would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's 1 bar. So I know you're pretty comfortable with odd times, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, between growing up in an Armenian family and
Oh,
hearing the
wow.
old Turkish 78s,
Yeah.
and then growing up with Mahavishnu and Indian music, yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
it's more fun.
Well, it is kind of. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, what was the group before Frank?
It was called the Creighton Preston Ensemble, and it started out with Emil Richards, Paul Beaver, and myself. And Michael Creighton was an artist, and so he would paint a painting while we're performing, and that was like the thing. But Michael loved the vibes and the marimba so much that he got Emil to show him how to play them, you know. And Emil, I mean, he was such a sweet guy. He died about, I don't know, 5 months ago, something like that, 6 months ago. And, but Emil was one of the sweetest persons I ever met, and we were good friends. But Michael bought a set of vibes and started working out on it, and he got really good. But, you know, like a lot of people, not knowing a thing about music, you know, he couldn't read a note of music. He didn't know what that was. It was a different language. And so we started playing, and we would just jam on a time signature, which Emil would do that too sometimes. And we wrote a piece together that was in 15. He called it Sweet 15. And yeah, that was really great. But so that we played a lot of concerts, he and I, and we had a couple other people. There was a keyboard player named Gosling Trauma.
Okay.
And another guy that taught at Occidental College. And somehow we had got this whole thing together and performed. And that was, and so we actually performed in this building, the same building at the same time. And Zappa was upstairs with the Mothers of Invention. Now I had already known Zappa because I met him at a place where there were, I don't know, there was like 5 stages and 1 stage in the center of the hall. And it was like being on an island, and Zappa was also performing from the center stage.
Where was this, Don?
I don't know where it was. I mean, it was in LA, but
Okay.
you know, as far as where it was, I don't know the name of it or anything. But I met Frank there, and we exchanged business cards, and later on he called me, and he wanted me to audition for a job, and we auditioned. When we auditioned, Zappa played "Oh No," which is in 7, you know. And how do you expect people to dance in 7? I don't know, but we didn't get the job. But, so I noticed his record collection, and later on he noticed mine, and we became friends. And so he still had nothing to do with the Mothers at that time, you know. This is way before that. But one day he came over to I didn't see him for a long time, and he came over to my house, and he had long hair, and he was wearing this monkey fur coat that would look just like his hair, and started telling me all about the Mothers, and you know. So he says, well, you should audition. And so I auditioned with the band. And Frank said, well, I'm sorry, Don, you don't know anything about rock and roll, and which I didn't, never played it. And so I didn't get that job,
Okay.
but I did start playing rock bands for the whole year after that. And so then there was this time when my band was down in the first floor, and Zappa was playing on the second floor, and Herb was there, who I knew because he ran a club that I and Charlie Hayden played in for a year, I think, over a year. And
Herb Cohen. Herb Cohen.
Yeah, Herb Cohen. And so I told him, I said, look, you ought to get me to audition again, because I've been playing in rock bands. I know rock now. And I did, and Zappa says, you're in the band and all that, so that's how that happened.
Who was in the band before you got there?
Oh, there was Ray Collins, Jimmy Carl Black, and Roy Estrada, and Frank. That was it. But that was enough to, do a job.
Create a commotion.
Frank wanted, he had music that he'd written that he wanted horns players and somebody like me who can stretch out, further than anybody else at that time. But, and so we got Bunk in the band. And Bunk, when I was in Trieste, Italy, in the army, I was rooming with Buzz Gardner, Bunk's brother. And so when they got out and everything, they migrated to California and LA, and so we hooked up and we used to jam together and do weird things. And I had at one point, we had a garage band kind of, and so I had the inside of a piano. I had 3 drive shafts hung on a stand like gongs. I had leaf springs, which were pretty common, brake drums, all these things. The leaf springs were almost like a marimba, only, but the sounds were totally weird. They had overtones on the overtones, and so it was fun, And Zappa used to come down there, and he would. I don't remember him playing, but he would. Listen, and he brought films for us to jam with. And we used to play the films of Microscopic Life and all kinds of stuff like that.
Right.
So
and Frank was a good percussionist, was he not?
He played drums. Not a set, but like an army drums in the marching band.
Yeah.
Or something. I like that. I don't know. He knew how to play. He could do a single stroke roll, but not very fast. Just who can't? One time, I asked Ruth, I just reminded her about this. I asked her a long time ago. I said, gee, Ruth, you have the cleanest single stroke roll of anybody I've ever met. And I said, how do you do it? And she says, well, I just pick up the sticks and I make my hands go real fast like this. So that was her explanation. And she still says that, it's like she never did have some weird technique or something like that. I have slowed stuff by her 3 times down. And it's still da 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 da.
Oh yeah.
It's. If you ever done that, I've done that with my playing, and it's like da 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 da, because it exaggerates, your playing.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that if you're going to play those Frank Zappa xylophone parts or marimba parts, you got to move around, baby.
No kidding.
You got to get moving.
Well, the part I'm talking about was Inca Roads, which is it's horrendous. And then the first time you say, oh my God, how could anyone play that? And then she does it after George's solo, and it's twice as fast. I just throw up my hands and say, That's impossible. Nobody could do that.
Did you find that Frank challenged you as a musician?
He challenged my sight reading. That's one thing he challenged, for sure. It's a hard question to answer.
Did you find that did he bring things out of players or musicians that you maybe didn't know?
Well, let's put it this way. He utilized what people could do. So when I was playing, since I had already come from an Odd Times band, that none of that fazed me at all. You know, I mean, it was just second nature. Now, Jimmy and Roy had never heard anything like that. And it's only due to the fact that both of them were pretty intelligent, even though when you listen to Roy, he's not very intelligent, but he could finish your sentence before you could most of the time. And he was like, so, I mean, I taught him the bass part in Don't You Ever Wash That Thing. Well, that bass part is hard, really hard. And I just play something, got it. Play a little more, got that, just no matter how hard it was, it didn't faze him at all.
Wow.
And Buell often said that Roy was his favorite bass player, but not so much of the technique or anything like that, it's just the sound that he got.
That's very interesting, yeah.
And Frank was always trying to ruin that because he kept trying to get Roy to play with a pick, and Roy just wouldn't.
Why would Frank want the pick?
Because it's clear. I mean, the attack is clear. I really don't know, but it sure fucks up the sound anyhow. Roy couldn't get that real deep, rich sound that he had with a pick.
So I wonder if you could just take us at all a little bit through your recollections into what kind of things happened in a mother's rehearsal. So what did you work on, and what did you just only wing when it was on stage? How much preparation goes into an early mother's gig?
Well, basically, he would take every song and change it, and Bunk is back there writing it all down real furiously, and then we'd have a rehearsal the next day and change that whole thing again. And Bunk is writing it up. Bunk spent so much time writing music, and you have to remember it. Well, my whole thing was memorizing was what I did, because my reading wasn't that good. On the other hand, Bunk was, he played with the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra, Philharmonic, and that's probably 90% of the people in the orchestra couldn't remember what they're, stuff. So I was way better off with that than Bunk was, because he had kept trying to write it all down. And this went on for years, not just days. And it was like every time we went on the road, when we got to a club, we get there early, and as soon as we were set up, we start playing songs, and he's changing everything, just maybe he would switch from 4/4 to 3/4, and all kinds of stuff like that, and certain rhythmic things that we did. One thing, this song, Little House, Now, I don't know if you ever played Little House.
I
No?
haven't played it. Little house I used to live in.
Yeah. Okay. So early on in the piece, and you know, we'd have people opening for us, like some group from San Francisco or something like that. And so the bass and drums are playing. It's like this. Okay, that's an 11. And then we have the melody was like. Well, that's in 12. So we would start playing this song, and you had to sense when it was over, because it didn't end on the end of the beginning of the phrase. It ended in the middle of the phrase. And so I think you had to play 7 of those phrases with the bass and drums, and then listen for the melody when it was coming to an end. And and we did it perfectly. But those guys that were opening for us, they were sitting there with their mouths hanging open, because they couldn't even hear it, let alone, you know, they didn't know what the hell we were doing, which is understandable. I mean, I don't know if I could either, if I were just listening to it.
And we're talking about the late 60s, right?
Yeah. 66, 67. So that's just an example of the kind of stuff we had to do, with Zappa. It was really, it was so interesting to me, really. Then we go over to Europe. The first time we went to Europe, we played at Albert Hall. Oh my God. And then I went up to the organ, and I'm standing there looking at it, and this guy walks over and he says, "Oh, do you want to play that here?" And he takes the key and opens it up, turns it on. Oh man. I sat there, I think I played for 4 hours straight, just to explore the entire organ. And I learned how to play a pipe organ that day, because before that day I'd never touched one, and now here I had this second largest pipe organ in the world to play around with. Oh my God. And of course Zappa had me play Louie Louie, during the show.
It's a very famous moment in Mother's history. Don Preston playing Louie Louie on the Royal Hall organ.
Not only that, I did it, what's his name? Wait a minute. Oh, Eric Clapton. I was in town, and Eric Clapton asked me if I wanted to play with his band at Albert Hall.
Wow.
And then while I was playing with him, I went up and played the organ too.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. It's in his book. So that was cool. And I knew Eric before that, of course. And I wound up playing with Jack Bruce for years, with Carla Bley and other people. And one day we brought him over. He lived about 10 miles from the hotel I was staying in Germany, because he married this German girl or something like that. And so we invited him over to our hotel room, and Jimmy Carl Black, we made pesto. Okay. Now Jimmy Carl Black thought that one clove meant the whole ball of garlic. So he put 3 balls of garlic in the pesto, and it was so hot that you could barely eat it. And so that's what we gave to Jack Bruce, when he came over, he was like trying to be nice, you know. Oh yeah, it's pretty good. Oh dear me.
Wow.
So
That was some band though, huh? With you and Carla Bley, Jack Bruce. Who else was on that band?
Michael Mantler, of course, and well, sometimes Steve Swallow, mostly. And I don't remember many of the other people's names. I mean, every once in a while, I'd be with, what's that guy? Played baritone and tuba.
Oh, Howard Johnson.
Howard Johnson, yeah. He would be there. And I think he's on Escalator Over the Hill.
Mm-hmm.
That was something to behold. Here's this cute, gorgeous, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, and the hardcore New York jazz musicians all together, and she's saying, "Oh, you do this and you do that," and then, oh my God, and they would, of course, but she had full control of the whole scene, and she knew exactly what she wanted and how she wanted it, and it was an amazing scene. Totally
What
amazing.
keyboards did you play with that?
I mostly sang, but I did play, I think I had a mini Moog, and I did some weird sound, and also I played glockenspiel on it, but mostly singing. That's basically it. As you know, with Michael Mantler, he did an opera, and he wanted me for that too. So I've had a little bit of a career singing in my life.
You sang on the Mantler opera.
Yeah, called School of Understanding. It was called, but it was beautiful. God, it was really great. And Jack was in the whole thing, and he was incredible. And Michael wrote it for chamber group and also full string orchestra. I mean, you know, like a really big string orchestra. Now, the string orchestra was the background for Jack Bruce's vocals, but that was pre-recorded because he couldn't afford to, you know, hire them for the gig. And we performed that in Copenhagen, 98, I think, something like that. And then we played it in Berlin in 99. And when the first gig, though, they completely covered the floor with sand. And they had car parts sticking out of the sand and broken TVs and all kinds of, you know, it was like a total art piece for when we had to do it. It was really amazing. It was really fun.
That's incredible stuff. I was always curious, what was your keyboard setup with the Mothers, and what were Frank's keyboard preferences sound-wise?
Well, I don't know if they were so much his preferences, but part of it was, of course. First of all, I had a Fender Rhodes. I may have had a suitcase model, but I'm not sure. I think eventually I wound up with just without anything on the bottom of it. And then I had it wasn't a Farfisa, but it was something like a Farfisa, cheap organ, you know. And the other thing, I had an RMI keyboard, which was very kind of clavinet sounding, that kind of thing. So that's basically, I had 3 keyboards, and that's what it was. And I also built my own synthesizer at the time, because this is 1966. They didn't even start to be built until 67. And I think nobody knew about them at the time. You know, I didn't know about them. Finally found out, became close friends with Bob Moog and helped him a little bit with the mini Moogs.
Did you also know Herb Deutsch?
I think so. I think I did know. He played mini Moog, didn't he?
He was helping Bob with the mini Moog development at that moment, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's No, I don't think I met
Yeah,
him.
he was a technician
Uh-huh.
who basically said to him, you know, you ought to put a keyboard on these things.
Right. And that's for
You'll
sure.
do better if there's a keyboard on it. If people can play music with it.
Yeah. That's totally right.
Yeah, I interviewed Herb for the Yale Oral History Project, and that blew my mind. That at a certain point, there's a difference between the Buchla and the Moog, kind of going modular versus mainstream in a way.
Well, the biggest difference between the Buchla and the Moog is the keyboard. But Buchla, he didn't care about keyboards at all. He just wanted pure electronic music, and that's what he got. And it was a great machine. Oh boy. There's an artist out here on the West Coast in LA. I mean, oh gosh, I wish I could think of his name because he's a pretty big artist. I would say most museums have a work of his. And I'll get it. It'll come to me. But anyhow, he invited me over to his house because he had a Buchla. And he wanted somebody to play with. So we used to go there. Maybe one other person would come and sit in, and we would just jam in his house, which strangely enough looked like one of his paintings. His house was shaped like, had this odd shape. But, oh God, it's just almost got it. Anyhow, that was kind of interesting.
Were you traveling with a modular synth in the early Mothers?
Oh, no. The most I ever did with that was I played in about 64 schools with a project called Title I, I think, where I'd go into a school like intermediate school and play. And I did things weird, some weird things with, I'd have this girl come and sit up, sitting right next to where I was playing, and then I'd wire her up with wires, and then I'd play something. And I said, "Jump around like you're being electrocuted." I would tell her and she would do that, and I would do that at every class I taught. And it just kind of made sense to have the synthesizer do that.
So when did you start using synths live?
Since what?
When did you start using synthesizers in a live setting?
Oh, 66. I made one.
But not with the Mothers?
Yeah, with the Mothers.
Oh, okay. And so was Frank involved in synth patches and getting sounds?
No. And when I say I made one, that means I had a big box that looked like equipment box, had that black leathery type of stuff. But in the box was first, there was a test oscillator. Those are like this big, And then there was an Echoplex in that box. And then I had about 30 or 40 other oscillators that did all kinds of things. Most of them were sometimes they would move around by themselves. Sometimes they would just play a tone. Sometimes they would be a control oscillator. So that was a very primitive. It wasn't really a synthesizer. It was mostly an electronic music generating box. And that's why I wanted it. I wanted to be able to generate electronic music for the Mothers when there was an occasion to do that. Frank loved it. Oh, it had a theremin in it too. That's another thing it had. So it was pretty cool. I liked it. Maybe I'll make one of those again. That
So how loose was a given performance in the early Mothers? Would you have had any inkling that Frank might pull some stunt in the middle of something? Would he ever give you a heads up?
I would have to say that the performance was totally loose. We never knew what we were going to play or do. And Frank just constructed an evening, you know. Sometimes it would be hand signals, sometimes it would be jumping from one time signature to another, you know, like while we're just playing. And I can remember playing a number of concerts where we only played 3 songs in an hour and a half. The rest was all improvised and all just, you know, out there stuff. Sometimes not out there, sometimes just playing on 1 chord or 2 chords or something like that. But basically, there's an interesting thing about Frank. If you notice, he never played chord changes. He never played a solo on chord change, except once, and I can't tell you what it was. I'd have to ask Chris. He knows everything.
I think Ike told me about this, and that Frank had worked on it for a really long time because he'd never played over changes.
Yeah.
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 But as far as like any of the comedy bits or the audience participation bits, those were always spontaneous.
Always, yeah.
Hmm.
I have to say the whole evening was spontaneous. You know, there was we didn't have a set list. There was no set list at all. Frank would jump up in the air, and when he landed, we were start playing another song. Nobody knew what it was, and we always played the right song.
Really?
And that is what I was talking about Roy. He was so quick that he could do that. So I don't know, you know, a lot of times Frank referred to More Than Human by Theodore Sturgeon as the way the group operated, that we were psychic and we knew what song we were supposed to play. The weird thing about that is because after the Mothers, I married my now present wife, and I had lived in a house. We lived in this house on Morton Avenue in Echo Park. Okay, I had lived in a house just up to the top of Morton Avenue, which is like a half a block, and around to the right. And one day I said, I'm going to go visit that house because I loved that house, you know, and I lived there for a year or something like that. So I went up there, knocked on the door, and the door opens, and this elderly man is standing there totally naked and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, well, sure. I just wanted to see this house I used to live in. He says, "Oh, well, come on in, you know." And I said, he said, "What's your name?" "Don Preston." And he said, "Well, my name is Ted Sturgeon." It was Theodore Sturgeon. And we became very good friends. We used to babysit his kid, and all, you know, just we were, you know, in touch with each other on a daily basis pretty much for the next year, next two or 3 years. And his wife was about 20 years younger than him, who also didn't wear any clothes. Uh-huh. And they made everything they had. You know, they made slippers out of rabbits, you know, and they'd use the meat of the rabbit to cook a stew, and then she made all her clothes. He made his clothes. She, you know, like on and on and on. You can imagine. But he was, I mean, he showed me a Klein bottle that somebody made for him. That, of course, you know, Klein bottles are in another dimension, part of it. So you couldn't see that part of it, of course. And then he had a Mobius strip made by somebody and just he had all this stuff and all these awards were, Hugo Awards and science fiction awards and all that kind of stuff. Really incredible. And he was brilliant. He was a brilliant person, brilliant, amazing man.
That's incredible.
He did come to one of my concerts and didn't like it though, which I understand that, because people that are so involved with their own area, they don't get a chance to know other areas of art. So he probably wouldn't like a contemporary artist either.
I find it fascinating that you guys, you and Frank, that circle of people, are very involved, very interested in sci-fi, very interested in horror flicks, very interested in comic books, and obviously same here. So, and then you had told me, and I find this very interesting, that Frank knew early on to advertise his albums in comics in Marvel.
Oh yeah, I have the book I just showed you. Where is it? Oh, here's another one. No, not this one. Now check it out. I didn't show you this picture.
There you go.
That's from a Marvel comic book. I think it was Doctor Strange. It was my favorite at that time.
There he is back there.
What is that? I can't see it.
On the wall, Doctor Strange.
Oh, that is him?
In a sort of Leonardo da Vinci diagram.
Yeah. I have to tell you one little thing. Let me pull this down. Chris Garcia was talking to his daughter, and she said, hey, honey, do you know what the Eye of Agamotto is? She said, oh, sure. And the movie had just come out like a year before. Oh, sure, I know that. And he says, well, look it up on the internet. So she goes and types in Eye of Agamotto, and it comes up, Eye of Agamotto, composition by Don Preston.
That's
1968.
Right. You had the Eye of Agamotto tune in the Mothers, right?
Yeah, they played it. Yeah. But it was, I wrote it around 66, I think, or 65, something like that.
Was it recorded?
It's not on any popular recordings. It might be on some weird mystery disc or something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure. No, I can't see now. I get my close-up glasses on. Yeah. Speaking of comics, have you ever watched Heroes?
The television show.
Yeah.
Yes.
That whole show is based on comics.
Yes.
The writing of the in-between writing, it's all comic book writing. One of the main characters is the comic book artist. And he paints paintings, and they all look like comic book paintings. Mm-hmm. They're terrible. I mean, painting wise. But
we've lived long enough so that comic books, which were shunned and viewed as corrupting of youth in the 50s and 60s and even frowned upon the 70s, and we lived long enough to see it now become a billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, no kidding. Good heavens. Almost everything is a comic book.
Graphic novels, comic books, all the scripts for movies, TV shows now.
Yeah.
So my 20-cent investments have paid off pretty well so far,
I gave mine all the way to one of my grandkids. I probably shouldn't have, but I never kept them, pristine.
No, they were reading copies. I mean, my collection was all comics I enjoyed, as
Yeah.
like my LP collection. You know, my LP collection is crazy, but it's not in great condition.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because these were our textbooks. These were our learning tools. You know.
Yeah, yeah. No kidding.
So, Don, I wanted to ask you a little bit about early synthesizer stuff, because you're at the forefront. You're in the, as I said earlier to you a couple days ago, you're in the laboratory that's developing what would become a mainstream practice of using real-time live synthesizers. What did you have to go through to make that happen, and to what extent do you think that it was really better for you in the studio setting where you had complete control over to take the time versus the live spontaneous synthesizer performances?
I've got a few hours in. Well, I mean, that is a 5-part question. I'm not sure what the first part was. I'm not sure what you said, something there that I didn't quite understand.
Well, just the idea of the first time synthesizers are ending up on stage versus ultimately where you get it to the point where you have the facility or the ability to do a synthesizer electronic music performance that would become a big influence on what we have today in terms of electronica or even EDM music. So I'm kind of taking us into the early days.
I have to start off by saying what my influences were. Basically, my influences were Luciano Berio, Luigi Nono, Louis and B.B. Barron, and a few others whose names I can't, come up with it right now. But that's, I would say, early 50s and mid 50s electronic music. Now, those guys, they got into that the same way that Philip Glass and the other guy. The reason they got into it is because they couldn't get an orchestra to perform their work. And when they were so popular and got, they really kind of made it with the electronic music. Now, Luciano Berio is like one of the top composers in Italy, or was, before he died. And same with Nono. He got into orchestral composition as well. But then there was a means to an end, kind of, but also because they're really great composers, their electronic music was incredible. So that's what I gyrated toward in the 50s. Don't ask me why. I can't answer that, other than the fact that my dad had 78 recordings of The Rite of Spring in our basement, which I used to listen to and loved. And for some reason in my life, it's always been about finding new expressions of music, and even newer expressions. And until right now, it's hard to find something new because it's all been said pretty much in terms of the harmonic scale, which music is developed through. Now today, when you have electronic music, you're all in between all the tracks, in the 12-tone scale. So, but nevertheless, my main reason for getting a synthesizer was not so I could play Bach or something like that, or you know, the latest hit song, it was so that I could use it as a means to reproduce sounds that haven't been heard, or at least they haven't had the tonalities that we're familiar with. So that's basically what the whole thing is, what I did that for, and well, I'm still doing it. I'm working on a couple of projects right now. You know, I also just got. Let's see if you can see that.
Yeah.
An Ableton. Okay. Now the Ableton is basically, if you listen to people that use the Ableton, you're going to hear a lot of looping and a lot of stuff that basically is simple and ordinary. The only thing is the push, which is part of the Ableton stuff, is so complicated and so open for stuff that nobody's heard, that I thought it would be an ideal instrument for me to use, because I can do things with it, you know, that the people haven't thought of yet. I mean, it's an incredible instrument, really amazing. So, you know, and then I have all this other stuff here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, you know, I've got a Mother, which is a kind of like a modular Moog. And Andre gave me this other thing. You know Andre, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's called a Uno, and it's like a mini Moog, only way better. I mean, it's got so many things in it that you can do that's just amazing. And then to round that out, I have a couple of echo machines, you know, and a mixer, of course. So I'm getting ready.
Yeah, Don, you're getting ready. You're unstoppable.
Well, after I finish my painting.
I hope I can be Don Preston when I grow up.
Well, you already are, man.
Don, it's so great to chat with you. This is really, it's just a pleasure.
Well, it is for me too.
I'm looking forward to hearing any of the new stuff. There's always more with you. And I want to see that book. I want to see the volumes of your writing.
Uh-huh.
So please definitely send me some stuff.
Okay. Well, I definitely, I have your email now, don't I? Or do I?
Yeah, I can email you my address if you want. So you're working on mostly electronic stuff these days?
Yeah, I would say that, yes.
And it seems like there's always something to do there for you, right? I mean, you're saying people are you're doing things that people aren't typically doing.
Right, and I mean that it just has to do with how you do it, you know, what kind of choices you make for the, you know, the pieces, they kind of write themselves in a sense. And if I could call that writing, I don't know. I mean, it's usually with electronic music, you explore the possibilities of the equipment you have, and then you try to do something that makes sense.
But you make an interesting point, which is how does one organize sound? Right? If music is organized sound, which includes all of the typical pitch and rhythmic organizations, right? Mm-hmm. But now you have sound outside of pitch, outside of necessarily rhythm, what are you looking at? Are you looking at timbre? Are you looking at shapes? Are you looking at what is development then in that world? What is variation in that world?
Well, the thing of it is, when I start doing something, first of all, I go through everything and acquaint myself with possibilities. And after I know what the possibilities are, then I just start somewhere and see where that leads me. Usually everything will lead you somewhere and you just have to follow it. And that's what I do. I just follow what's going on, and before you know it, you got a whole piece constructed, and if you recorded what you're doing, you're in luck. Sometimes I do an incredible piece and I didn't hit the record button. I'm sure you've been there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, because we look at technology, we look at these machines, and you see someone like Frank, who used the synclavier really just to execute difficult pitch and rhythmic material, right? I mean, did you ever find that he was interested in organizing noise or sound?
If he was, I've never heard it. There was this controversy about, with the California Ear Unit, where he asked them to do a concert of some music that he'd written. And so they were going to perform at the Bing Theater, which is the California, Museum of Art. And they got on stage and Frank says, no, you guys are too sloppy. He says, I'm going to ask you to lip sync the music. So, and he had the whole thing on with the synclavier, right?
Right.
So I didn't bring that. I think he recorded it, and then he brought that down to the Bing Theater. And Morton Subotnick was in the audience, of course, because he teaches at Cal Arts. And so they lip synced the entire piece, which means they were going like this, but they weren't hitting the mallets. I mean, hitting the bars and the drums, and they weren't playing, for the whole piece. And afterwards, the audience roared and applauded, and it was so great. And then Morton Subotnick went backstage. He says, wow, that was really phenomenal. You guys are amazing. And they said, Morton, we didn't play it. We lip sunk it. And he said, what? No, you can't do that. And they were, and he was pissed off, really pissed off about it. But nevertheless, what was done, and you can't change that, right?
But that's a real Frank moment, I guess.
Totally. And I met Amy and Art Jarvinen.
Jarvinen, yeah.
They were playing at a concert I was playing at, and Art Jarvinen was playing this piece by Cage with porcupines, and pulling on the little things that stuck out. Really incredible. And I forgot what Amy played, but so afterwards, I said, boy, you guys are amazing. Did you hear about the controversy with Frank, about some group? And she said, we are the controversy.
Yeah.
And then they told me about the entire thing, which is amazing, that I love them for art.
Yeah. But clearly Frank was very particular, very meticulous.
He was, and then one thing I will say about your unit is they don't really, normally, they don't put a lot of attention on a piece that they're going to play. I mean, even a piece by Crumb or somebody like that, they just, they'll practice it a couple times and then go out there and perform, which sadly it leaves a little lacking. They played a piece of mine, and I was happy with it. It was okay. So it didn't bother me too much. Maybe it wasn't hard enough, So
one experience I had, of only two experiences I had with Frank, one, the second time I ran into him, he was in the audience at Juilliard for a performance of his Perfect Stranger piece, which had been recorded by Boulez and Earcam. And Frank and Gail went backstage, and I saw him there waiting to speak to the musicians who were coming out. So I had a moment, and I just introduced myself, said, "Hello, Frank. What's your favorite Varese piece?" And he said, "Octandre." And I said, "Oh, really? Not Des Airs?" And he said, no, Octandre has pretty much everything I want from a Varese piece, So that was interesting. And then he proceeded to compliment the orchestra at Juilliard. And, these were like 19, 20-year-old students.
Oh, wow.
And he said, your intonation was great. It was actually better than the Boulez group.
Mm-hmm.
So that struck me, as I'm sure he does not give out those kind of compliments, easily.
No. But, he means it too.
Yeah.
So that's really, they must have been very good.
It was cool. It was good. It's good to, it was good to start hearing, at that time, it was new that you're hearing Frank's orchestral music being performed live alongside Berio and Dalla Piccola, or even, as you mentioned, Ligeti. It was starting to happen, and now I think it's a lot more common. Oh, Don, I don't know. We could just go on and on about stuff, but I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
Okay, then me too. I'm, very good.
We'll do it again.
All right, I've got one suggestion for you.
Sure.
Look up Barbara Hannigan singing Ligeti.
Okay.
There's a picture of her looking like a little girl. There's also the same piece with the same woman where she's dressed in a black gown. You want to watch the one where she looks like a little girl and doing this Ligeti piece and conducting it too. I mean,
wow.
Unbelievable. It's phenomenal. Anyhow, okay.
Well, thanks, Don.
All right.
And you stay well, stay safe.
Yeah, you too, man.